Hi there, Susan Glenz here, team leader of the Susan Glenz team at Keller Realty in Rochester, New York. And today I want to share with you some tips for bulletproofing your transaction if you're selling your home. This is something that isn't talked about too much, and I think it's really important to make sure that you know how to best prepare yourself to get to the closing table. And we want to make sure when we're working with our clients that we're doing everything we can up front to prevent the deal from falling apart. Will we be able to prevent everything? No. And there's definitely proactive steps that we can take to help mitigate the risk of the deal falling apart. So today what we're going to focus on is what can you do in preparation for selling. When you're preparing the home to get ready for market, there's a lot of things that you can do. And we're going to talk about 5 things today that you can do to get your home ready for market that helps bulletproof the transaction when you actually go to sell. The first thing that we recommend when working with our sellers is prep work. We always say prep work is critical. Putting time in up front helps mitigate issues down the road. So the one thing that you can do as a seller to prep is have a pre-inspection. That means hire a home inspector to come in, find issues that you can then work with your agent to determine if they should be repaired or not. Because what you want to do is prevent the buyer from seeing those issues because you've already taken care of them. And then in addition with prep work, we always recommend that you get your paperwork together. Your survey map, any permits, certificates of compliance, any new assessments. Work with your agent to identify what paperwork do you need to have up front so that it doesn't become a holdup down the road. The second recommendation we have is identify your A-team. And here's what I mean by your A-team. You want to make sure that you have all of the key partners that are going to help you through this process identified up front so they can be a go-to resource for you from the very beginning. So you're going to want to have a top agent representing you. You're going to want to have a really strong real estate attorney representing you and understand who they use for title work. You're going to want to have contractors lined up in case there's repairs that you need to make to the property. Work with your agent to identify an A-team of people and make sure you interview them to make sure they're the right fit for you and they're knowledgeable in their area of expertise. Because what we know to be true is that if something happens down the road, you're going to rely on your A-team to help save the deal. Our third recommendation is disclose, disclose, disclose. When you're selling your home, you want to make sure that if there's any material issue with the property, you're disclosing that up front so buyers can go into that purchase eyes wide open and it doesn't end up falling apart right before closing. So you're going to want to disclose material issues to the property. You're going to want to disclose deed restrictions or easements to the property that might concern the buyer. A great example with a deed restriction is, let's say pools are not allowed in the neighborhood for some reason, and the buyer that buys your property absolutely wants to put a pool in. If they're not aware of that deed restriction up front, they might find it out at closing and back out of the deal. So make sure to disclose that up front. Additionally, any neighborhood changes that are happening, if you know a shopping mall is being built next door, you might want to disclose that up front to avoid the deal falling apart at the end. And lastly, any special assessments or tax changes, disclose that up front so buyers go in eyes wide open. Our fourth recommendation when working with sellers to bulletproof their transaction is market honestly and accurately. And your agent's really going to drive this for you. However, take some ownership in it and make sure that you read the marketing remarks, review all the specs before the listing goes live to make sure that if they're marketing it as a 4-bedroom, for example, it truly is a 4-bedroom. Double check the square footage, all of the specs, because the last thing you want is for the deal to fall through at the end because the buyer thought something was one way in the marketing and it never truly was, and it was truly administrative oversight. So market honestly and market accurately. And our fifth and final recommendation to bulletproof the transaction when you're preparing to sell is know the contract inside and out. Or make sure you're working with an agent that is a true contract expert. Why? Well, because there's a lot of loopholes inside of a contract. And if it's not written properly, if revisions to the contract aren't in writing properly, you could expose yourself as a seller to the deal falling apart. So make sure you're working with an agent that knows how to manage those loopholes. They know the difference between a term and a contingency. They know all the places that a buyer could back out, and they're protecting you in writing to prevent that as much as possible. So those are our 5 recommendations when preparing your home to sell in order to set yourself up for success to bulletproof the transaction as much as possible. Now, what happens when you get an offer? Well, there's a whole host of other issues that can happen, and you want to make sure that you bulletproof the transaction again. So we have great advice coming your way. Stay tuned for more information from the Susan Glenz team on how to bulletproof the transaction when you're selling your home and you have an offer.